I was 15 when I first started paying attention to film as a serious art form. I slurped up that good auteur theory, and one of the films that came up again and again as like an example of a classic Hollywood auteur film was Johnny Guitar. So I borrowed a VHS copy from my library and I gave it a watch.
The name, sir, is Johnny Guitar.
That's no name.
Anybody care to change it?
And when I was 15, I thought it was fine. I didn't really think about it again after that, just kind of forgot it existed until recently when a mutual of mine on Blue Sky mentioned it in passing, and I thought, oh yeah, Johnny Guitar exists. Maybe I should watch it again. And I did, and holy shit, this movie rules. It slaps, it whips, dare I say it, it has the juice. Now, your mileage may vary. This is a 1950s melodrama made in Technicolor. A 1950s melodrama in true color. This means everything is dialed up to 11. The dialogue, the performances. Look at her blouse. Look how yellow it is. It should not be that yellow, and I love it. There's an earnestness and sincerity to melodrama, and it operates primarily on emotion. Big, swelling emotion. The plot doesn't unfold according to realism or any external logic, but the internal logic of that emotion, of the fears and desires of the characters. The film is called Johnny Guitar, but Jonathan Guitar is absolutely supporting cast. Top billing goes to Joan Crawford as Vienna, who owns a saloon.
Never seen a woman who was more a man. She thinks like one, acts like one, and sometimes makes me feel like I'm not.
So, there's some gender going on here. Contemporary American reviewers really hated this. The New York Times criticized Crawford's performance as sexless and as sharp and romantically forbidding as a package of unwrapped razor blades, because why should you care about a lady if you're not horny for her? But the film's characters must all be into unwrapped razor blades because basically everyone is horny for Vienna. Johnny Guitar is horny for Vienna. He's a former boyfriend that she's hired as protection. The dancing kid is horny for Vienna, and so the two boys are mad at each other about it. This kid, Turkey, is also horny for Vienna, and let's be honest, he really wants to call her mommy.
You talk like I was a boy. I'm a man.
Every man's entitled to be a boy for a little while. You were cheated, Turkey.
I'll prove to you I'm a man.
But Vienna doesn't have time for this shit, and that's because of Emma, who is probably also horny for Vienna, we'll get to that in a bit, but is definitely horny for the dancing kid.
Maybe you don't hate him. I wouldn't spit on him. Oh, he was always eyeing me. I never told my poor brother because Len would have killed him. That's why he held up the stage and killed my brother, because now he thinks he can get me. That's why. You've got it a little twisted, haven't you, Emma? Now you think you can get him. She's crazy.
Also, Ernest Borgnine is in the movie and he's horny for being an asshole. I don't know how to explain it, but he is definitely horny for it.
What do you mean?
Bart, you don't drink. You don't smoke. You're mean to horses. What do you like?
Me. I like me. And I'm taking good care of me.
Emma is played by Mercedes McCambridge and is a really great performance. She's so horny for the dancing kid and is so mad about it, and all that seething and desire and repression just radiates off of her. And this is what drives the story. She knows she's not supposed to want the dancing kid, so she's going to frame him for her brother's murder, going to get him killed, so you can't make her feel like that anymore.
You want the kid and you're so ashamed of it you want him dead. You want me dead too. Then maybe you can sleep nights. I won't sleep till I see both of you hanged. You and the kid and all of your filthy kind.
Now, when I first heard about this film, some critic had mentioned it having a lesbian subtext, and I gotta admit, at 15, this was lost on me, because it just seemed like Emma and Vienna just hated each other. But all the things Emma is doing to destroy the dancing kid, she's also doing to try to destroy Vienna. And just like the kid, it doesn't seem to be an actual logical reason for it. When Emma destroys Vienna's saloon, there is so much crooked pleasure in it. And when she's given the chance to hang Vienna for crimes they all know that she didn't commit, she's at once conflicted and rapturous. So yeah, I think that's a reasonable read of the film. You can also read it as being about the politics of the 1950s, about populist violence, and the way the law protects the property and desires of the rich.
You heard her tell how they're going to run the railroad through here, bring in thousands of new people from the east. Farmers, dirt farmers, squatters. They'll push us out. So you better wake up, or you're going to find you and your women and your kids squeezed between barbed wires and fence posts.
There's a whole plot about the railroad coming through where she's built her saloon, and a wealthy rancher who wants her out so he can grab that land. He's played by Ward Bond, a grade-A asshole who spied on his colleagues and reported suspected communists and homosexuals to the FBI. Speaking of which, there's a critique of McCarthyism here, particularly in this scene where Turkey is compelled to implicate Vienna.
Vienna got Jake to open the bank for you, didn't she?
Come on, Turkey, tell us. I'll give you my word you won't hang.
Stop making promises you can't keep.
Stay out of this, Marshal.
Just tell us Vienna was one of your bunch, and we'll give you a chance.
We might even let you right out of here.
You're only a boy. We don't want to hurt you.
The truth, son, that's all we want.
Just tell us she was one of you, Turkey, and you'll go free.
Better talk, boy. You better talk.
What should I do? I don't want to die. What do I do?
Save yourself.
And this is something where the director, Nicholas Ray, may have had some experience. Having been a communist in his youth, he was brought before the House Un-American Activities Committee. According to the first of his 4 ex-wives, in order to save himself, Ray lied and told the HUAC that she had converted him. Sterling Hayden, who plays Johnny Guitar, himself was a cooperative witness with the committee, naming names that as a result ended up on the blacklist. He also blamed a woman, in this case his mistress, for recruiting him. The film has a mixture of empathy and contempt for Turkey, which has the texture of both self-reflection and hand-wringing self-flagellation.
Promise! You promised me I wouldn't die. You promised!
Nicholas Ray was, by all accounts, not the greatest dude in the world. He was a heavy drinker, a womanizer, physically abusive to his partners, erratic, difficult to live with and to work with. He sucked. He also was not gay or bi. It was very important to him that people know that. He was very insistent that he was not gay or bi. Why do people keep asking him this? He just slept with men and fell madly in love with James Dean and had a secret boyfriend that he moved to Hollywood and expected to always be on call for him while he was living the rest of his life.
If I had one day when I didn't have to be all confused and I didn't have to feel that I was ashamed of everything, if I felt that I belonged someplace, then...
The film ends with a violent shootout. Emma and the rancher's men are there to wipe out the dancing kid in Vienna once and for all. Emma kills the kid, wings Vienna, and then dies herself. That leaves Johnny and Vienna against a bunch of dudes with guns, all in the pocket of the wealthy rancher, but they just walk by them, walk through them. None of them try to stop them. And then the film just ends. Because none of this conflict was really about that, about the plot. It was about repression, about envy, about these big, uncontrollable emotions that Emma couldn't reconcile or live with. And once that's resolved, what does the rest of it matter? Truffaut called it a fairy tale, a hallucinatory western, and said that the bold, violent color by True Color contributes to the sense of strangeness. The hues are vivid, sometimes very beautiful, always unexpected. Nicholas Ray's films often feel like this, like dreams or like fevers. While American critics hated the film, the French loved it. Ray was a favorite of Truffaut, Godard, and their pals, who made a case for him as an auteur. Now, when some folks hear auteur theory, what they hear is the director is the author, the only voice that matters. And they think, well, that's bullshit. What about all the other people who worked on the film? And you're right, that is bullshit. But I think that understanding of auteur theory really flattens out and distorts what these French mucky-mucks were talking about. Partially, that's because that's the straw man version Pauline Kael liked to present so she could knock it down. Do not get me started on Raising Cain. And partially that's because a lot of auteurist critics would overstate the case and say provocative shit to get attention for themselves. Truffaut was a bougie little twerp, Godard was a bit of an edgelord. Core idea that certain directors have trademarks, obsessions they return to, themes they explore, ways in which they choose to tell the story, much like an author does. I think that's a really useful way to look at films, and it's something people can and have applied to other film disciplines, to cinematographers, editors, screenwriters, actors. Joan Crawford in this movie is very Joan Crawford. That New York Times review I mentioned, it didn't just say Crawford was sexless, but that she was sexless as usual, which is gross, but also is talking about qualities that run throughout Crawford's career, plain women who refuse to be convenient objects for the male gaze. And there's a lot to be gained by considering this performance in that context. It was, in fact, Crawford's film. At this point in her career, she exercised full approval over her scripts and initiated her own projects, carefully controlling her image and choice of roles. She had purchased the rights to the novel Johnny Guitar from author Roy Chancellor, who had dedicated the book to her. Side note, I want to track down a copy of the book so I could compare the two, but it is selling for triple digits, and look, I just ate a $6 pizza from 7-Eleven. I do not have 750 of your human dollars to spend on a book. But according to this Goodreads review I found, it's basically the same, but the film made improvements. Crawford was the one who chose Ray to direct the film, and she brought the script with her to the studio Republic. That script was written by Ben Maddow, supposedly with Philip Yordan, but only Yordan got credit. That's because Maddow was blacklisted after being investigated by the HUAC. In the 30s, he worked on left-wing newsreels in the 1942 pro-union nonfiction film Native Land.
It happened again. They say he was a union man. Nothing in the newspapers. Wasn't on the radio. Don't understand it. New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Fort Smith, Arkansas. A country church used as a meeting place by Negro and white sharecroppers. It was midsummer 1936. They wanted 10 cents more for their cotton, just enough to live on. They held a meeting. The sheriff deputized 15 men.
His bona fides as a passionate progressive were unimpeachable, and other soon-to-be blacklisted writers like Walter Bernstein admired his talent, saying that Maddow had a film sense that was then entirely new to me. He wrote for the eye as well as the mind, while I was still chained to the ear. Yordan frequently worked as a front for Maddow and other blacklisted writers. How much Yordan actually contributed is a matter of debate. Maddow told Patrick McGilligan, "Philip Yordan has never written more than a sentence in his life. He's incapable of writing."
Now look here, this is a hanging matter. We can't just go arresting people without proof.
If the kid was here, would you ask for proof?
The dancing kid and Vienna aren't the same.
I say they are.
And yeah, it makes sense that a blacklisted screenwriter wrote this scene.
What should I do? I don't want to die. What do I do?
4 years later, Maddow began working again under his own name. Walter Bernstein knew what this meant.
It had meant he had given names. It was something I did not want to believe. I also did not understand it. Maddow had been working steadily since being blacklisted, mostly writing scripts for a writer-producer named Philip Yordan, who then placed his own name on them. And he had written some very good ones, including the loopy western Johnny Guitar. Whatever he had not done because he was starving. We met at a coffee shop and embraced. I found myself very glad to see him again and very apprehensive. We sat down and ordered 2 of the breakfast specials, and then he said what I knew and feared he would say. And he said it right away. He had testified in secret and named 7 or 8 or maybe 10 people. He was not exactly sure how many, and now he was working again. But why did you do it? I asked. Why? You were working. I couldn't stand going into the screen room after the lights went out, he said. It had nothing to do with money or politics or being afraid or not able to work. He simply could no longer stand living in the shadows.
I'm not ashamed of how I got what I have. The important thing is I've got it.
I felt there was something I should feel that I was not feeling. I should feel anger or contempt or disgust. Maddow had not been forced to do what he did. He had been working, been paid well, surviving the blacklist better than most. He'd gone through the worst of it. But there are no gradations of betrayal. He had sold his friends so he could come out of the dark. Now he stood in the light and he could put his name on his work, but he had sold his name, as well as his friends. And all I could feel was sadness.
When he was asked about this later in life, Maddow was evasive and denied it. Nicholas Ray denied it as well. Of the 3 former communists who worked on this film and named names, only Sterling Hayden owned up to it. He regretted it immediately, and decades later cited the contempt I have had for myself since the day I did that thing. I should probably talk about Hayden's performance. Maybe I should talk about Johnny Guitar in this video about Johnny Guitar.
There's nothing like a good smoke and a cup of coffee. You know, some men got the craving for gold and silver. Others need lots of land with herds of cattle. And there's those that got the weakness for whiskey and for women. When you boil it all down, what does a man really need? Just a smoke and a cup of coffee.
Mr. Guitar is presented as the manliest man who ever did man things. Tough, rugged, almost mythic. This is pretty standard for a Western hero, and the sort of masculine ideals Hayden embodied in many Westerns and war films.
All of a sudden, I don't like you, mister.
Now that makes me real sad. I always hate to lose a friend.
But as the film goes on, we increasingly see the ugly side of this masculine ideal. The fight scene between Hayden and Borgnine is framed as clumsy, stupid, and pointless. Johnny's refusal to wear a gun isn't a sign of his self-assuredness, but of his addiction to violence, his guilt and his shame.
You're still gun crazy, aren't you?
No, I thought the youngster was trying to shoot up the place.
Frank, Eddie, and Sam didn't think so.
I guess I acted a little hasty.
If I hadn't stepped in front of Turkey, you would have shot him. Where are your guns?
In my saddlebag.
Suppose you leave them there. I'll tell you when to use them.
You're the boss.
You haven't changed at all, Johnny.
What made you think I had?
In 5 years, a person should learn something.
5 years ago, I met you in a saloon. Now I find you in one. I don't see much change.
Except I own this one.
His relationship with Vienna went sour 5 years ago. It was his fault. Of course it was.
It's a sad story.
I listen good to sad stories.
5 years ago, I loved a man. He wasn't good, he wasn't bad, but I loved him. I wanted to marry him, to work with him, to build something for the future.
They should have lived happily ever after.
They didn't. They broke up. He couldn't see himself being tied down to a home.
Looks like the girl did a smart thing in getting rid of him.
But the thing he's bitterest about is that she's fine. The breakup ruined him, hollowed him out, but Vienna is thriving, has made a life for herself, has moved on, while he's stuck with this broken heart. And in the end, what use is this tough guy bullshit? The violence, the anger, the past that haunts him. He doesn't even kill the bad guy. He's barely a presence in the climax, only managing to shoot Borgnine, which is like if The Lion King ended and all the title character did was take out one of the hyenas. And because Hayden, in his performance, embodies a certain construction of masculinity, he's actually really perfect in embodying a critique of that construction. and the ways in which it regards women and nonconformity. It's not the only time he did it, either.
I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, communist subversion, and the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
Critiques of conservatism and conformity occur throughout Ray's films, along with questions about masculinity. Some of his other films of this period do not seem as aware of the sexism their heroes espouse, or at least there's no Vienna there to push back against it.
I mean, if he had guts to knock Mom cold once, then maybe she'd be happy and then she'd stop picking on him.
And these films feel less interested in the perspective and inner lives of their women. This is absolutely something Crawford brought to the table. A perspective, an attitude, an alchemy, which makes Johnny Guitar a fascinating and layered film. So this was me talking about an old film that I like that no one cares about. That should be great for the algorithm. I do this sometimes in between my longer pieces about board games. Thanks to my Patreon producers for putting up with this.
Down there, I sell whiskey and cards. All you can buy up these stairs is a bullet in the head. Now, which do you want?